You check your phone again. Nobody texted back. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. But somewhere underneath that thought, something tightens. Something old. Something that has nothing to do with your phone at all. Scientists used to think loneliness was just sadness with no plot. A mood. A bad week. But the real answer is far stranger. Loneliness isn't an emotion your brain invented to ruin your evening. It's an alarm. A very old one. And it was built for a world that doesn't exist anymore. For most of human history, being alone didn't mean a quiet Saturday night. It meant death. Your ancestors didn't survive the African savanna by being strong individually. They survived because they were never individual for long. A lone human, separated from the group, was a meal waiting to happen. No claws. No fangs. No fur thick enough for a cold night alone. Just a slow, soft, clever ape that needed numbers to live. So evolution did what it always does. It built a warning system. Not for predators directly. For distance. For the gap between you and your people. That warning system is loneliness. Dr. John Cacioppo, a researcher who spent decades studying social isolation at the University of Chicago, described loneliness as functioning almost exactly like physical pain. Not metaphorically. Literally. When you feel excluded, the same regions of your brain light up as when you stub your toe or burn your hand. Your brain doesn't have a separate file for social injury. It just files it under pain. Real, physical, evolutionary pain. Why would your brain do that? Because pain works. Pain gets your attention. Pain makes you do something. If isolation simply felt neutral, your ancestors would have wandered off, distracted, and never come back. They would have stayed in that meadow a little too long, fallen a little too far behind the group, and never noticed until it was too late. Loneliness is the body's way of screaming get back before it's too late. This is the part that surprises people. Loneliness was never really about feelings. It was about survival math. A 2010 meta-analysis led by Julianne Holt-Lunstad pulled together data from over 300,000 people and found something that should have made headlines for a year straight. Chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by an amount comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Not feeling a bit sad. Not having an off week. Sustained, chronic disconnection. It carries a mortality risk on par with one of the most studied killers in modern medicine. Your body does not know the difference between social exclusion and physical danger. Both raise cortisol. Both raise inflammation. Both put your nervous system on alert, scanning for threats, sleeping lighter, healing slower. A body braced for danger that never specifically arrives still pays the cost of bracing. So when you feel that tight, hollow ache after being excluded from a conversation, or left on read, or skipped over for an invite, you are not being dramatic. You are not being too sensitive. You are running ancient software on modern hardware, and the software still thinks isolation equals threat. Here's where it gets stranger. Loneliness isn't just about literally being alone. You can be surrounded by people and still trigger the alarm. Researchers call this the difference between social isolation and perceived isolation. Isolation is the number of people around you. Perceived isolation is whether you feel like one of them. And it's the second one that your nervous system actually responds to. This explains something almost everyone has felt but rarely names. The specific ache of being in a crowded room, at a party, in a group chat, and still feeling like an outsider looking in through glass. Your ancestors' alarm system wasn't built to count heads. It was built to detect belonging. Proximity without belonging doesn't satisfy it. The body wants connection, not just company. A landmark study by psychologist Naomi Eisenberger used something called the cyberball experiment to test this directly. Participants played a simple ball-tossing game with two other players, except the other two were computer programs. At some point, the program would simply stop throwing the ball to the participant. No explanation. No insult. Just exclusion. Eisenberger's brain scan showed activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region associated with physical pain, lighting up in people who were excluded from a game they knew wasn't even real. The brain didn't care that it was just a simulation. It responded the way it would to a wound. Think about what that means for you. Every time you felt that small sting from being left out of plans you didn't even want to go to, that wasn't weakness. That was a few 100,000 years of evolutionary wiring, still doing its job, in a world that no longer matches the threat it was built for. Because here is the twist your ancestors never had to deal with. Their loneliness alarm came with a built-in solution. If you felt isolated, you went and found your tribe. You sat by the fire. You spoke to someone. The alarm turned off because the actual problem got solved. Your alarm doesn't have that same easy off switch anymore. You can scroll through hundreds of faces a day and still come home to silence. You can have 400 online friends and nobody to call when something goes wrong at 2 in the morning. The modern world gave you the appearance of connection without always giving you the substance of it. Your alarm system, built for small tribes of 50 to 150 people who you saw daily and depended on for survival, is now trying to interpret a world of glowing screens, scattered relationships, and acquaintances who know your face but not your life. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar's research suggests the human brain evolved to comfortably manage real, layered relationships with around 150 people. Not 150 followers. 150 people whose names, faces, histories, and needs you actually track. Most modern lives don't come close to that number in meaningful form, even while technically being more connected than any humans in history. So the alarm keeps ringing. Quietly, in the background, most days. Sometimes loudly, late at night, when the apartment is too quiet and the phone has gone dark. This is why loneliness doesn't just feel bad. It is, biologically, treated as urgent. Your nervous system is not being irrational when it makes isolation feel unbearable. It is doing exactly the job it was built to do, in an environment radically different from the one it was designed for. The mismatch is the problem. Not you. Knowing this changes something. Loneliness stops being a personal failing and starts looking like what it actually is. A signal. Not a flaw in your character. A flare sent up by a very old part of your brain that still believes your survival depends on being seen, known, and held inside a group of people who would notice if you disappeared. The next time that hollow feeling shows up, after a quiet weekend, after a message that never came, after a room full of people that somehow still felt empty, you don't have to ask what's wrong with you. You can ask a different question instead. Who is your fire? Who would notice if you didn't come back? Because your ancestors didn't survive the world by being unbreakable alone. They survived by being unbreakable together. And somewhere inside you, that same ancient alarm is still ringing, not to punish you, but to bring you home. You check your phone again. This time, maybe you call instead of scroll. Because the answer was never in the screen. It was always in the fire, and the people sitting around it, waiting for you to come back.